We've seen in the first two segments that this world is God's world. It belongs to him by right of creation. He made it. It's his. But that it's a world that's very far gone from his original purpose and intention for it. That the virus of sin and evil has entered it and corrupted it and brought, instead of life and peace, death and conflict. The worst thing that you can do in the face of a problem is to bury your head in the sand and pretend that it doesn't exist. Not much better is to make a response, but a response that's an impersonal response. We see this all the time with politicians who, faced with problems, simply try and throw money at the problem and hope that it goes away and leaves them alone and doesn't trouble them again. It's an impersonal response, and it usually achieves very little. The best kind of response to make to any situation is a personal response, to get involved yourself personally. The essence of Christianity is that God has himself personally gotten involved in our situation and disaster under sin. He's gotten involved in the person of his own Son, Jesus of Nazareth, whom he gave to us to save us from our sin. The beginning for Jesus was not his birth at Nazareth. The Christian understanding of the person who Jesus is and was is that he existed from all eternity with God as God's own Son, who took humanity to himself with all its limitations and problems, all its complications and hassles. He took that humanity to himself and lived life right. That he lived life the way it was meant to be lived, full of life and peace and joy. That his life was like the beginning of a new way, a new humanity, starting again the way God intended it to be. Of course, it's his life that gives authority to his teaching. Jesus is well known for his teaching, and those at the time knew him also as one who spoke with authority, not as their teachers did that were contemporary with Jesus. It's Jesus' life lived right that gives authority to his teaching, and means that he's worth taking seriously even today. Of course, it's not his life so much as his death which constitutes the heart of his response to our problem in sin. Uniquely, Jesus didn't have to die. He was not someone for whom death came naturally. We can't avoid death, but Jesus chose not to avoid death. He chose to take our place in death, to take our place under the judgment of death, to free us from that judgment. His death was taking our place under the wrath of God against our sin, to bear that wrath and that judgment in our place, to take our punishment for us, that which we deserve. You see, his death was dealing with us as sinners, those who sin by agency, as perpetrators. There's another way you can understand Jesus' death. His death was also a sacrifice. It's often talked about in that way in the Bible. You know, when something goes wrong in a relationship, when you sin against someone, often your inclination will be to try and make it up to them. Perhaps to buy them a gift or a card, to make a phone call, go to some special effort which shows that you wish it wasn't that way, that you wish you hadn't done that thing, and that you want things to be back the way they were. Sacrifice is not that uncommon in our world. Well, Jesus' death also is understood as a great sacrifice, the great sacrifice. The great sacrifice which makes it up to God for us, which offers to God the gift which we should offer, but which we can't. Jesus' death is a death that deals with our agency in sin, but it's also a death which deals with our victimhood in sin. You see, Jesus takes onto himself in his death all the full face of injustice and evil, and declines to fight fire with fire. He declines to repay evil with evil, but instead overcomes evil with good. He shows and exposes evil as bankrupt and as a dead end, and overcomes it with good. Jesus deals with sin both for us as victims and also for us as perpetrators. He frees us from this sin by his death. Of course, Jesus' death on the cross was not the end for him, just as his birth as a baby was not the beginning for him. God, with great power and love and faithfulness to Jesus, raised him from the dead, brought him back to life, not back to an old life, but through death to a new life, a life the way God intended it to be lived. We're familiar with the hero saves town and rescues people from bad guy kind of movie. You see it all the time. Perhaps the pinnacle of this genre of movie is the spaghetti western. Clint Eastwood rides into town, a man without a past, works heroically, perhaps even sacrificially to save the town, and then rides off again into the distance, leaving just the dust behind him. That's not the way it is with Jesus. Jesus doesn't just ride off again and leave us to our own devices. No, God raised him from the dead to be Lord, to be the boss, to be the ruler, the champion of a new community, a new people, a new humanity, who live life the way he has given it to be lived, who live life saved by Jesus under his lordship. We've got to ask ourselves again the question, what difference does it make to understand the life, death and resurrection of Jesus in this way? Christian author C.S. Lewis put the options starkly. He said there are a limited number of options. On the one hand, you can say that Jesus was a liar, a religious charlatan and crook, just like there have been so many of those. Alternatively, you could say Jesus was a lunatic, a madman, akin to someone who called himself a poached egg. Or you can say that Jesus was Lord, who he said he was, and honour him in that way. Lewis points out the one thing you can't say of Jesus was that he was a respectable, moral teacher. The sorts of things Jesus did, the kinds of things that Jesus said, just don't leave us that option. He's not someone that you can respect. He's someone that you can despise or dismiss or love. But there is no middle ground there. Which one is it going to be for you?